The ancient generation ship Eternal Hope drifted silently at the edge of Galactic Council space. Its massive hull reflected the light of distant stars. Inside, monitoring systems hummed to life for the first time in millennia. Admiral Han Juwu's cryopod hissed open. Frost evaporated as warmth returned to her body. She gasped, her lungs burning as they filled with air for the first time in 50,000 years. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim blue light of the revival chamber. "Welcome back, Admiral," said a calm voice. "The preset coordinates have been reached. It is time." Juwu recognized Sentinel, the ship's eye. Its voice was the last thing she had heard before entering the long sleep. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. A small robot arm extended with a water pouch. She drank greedily. "Status report," she finally managed to say. "All systems functioning within acceptable parameters," Sentinel replied. "Fleet integrity at 94%. We have arrived at the edge of what is now called Galactic Council space." Juwu's fingers trembled as she accessed the ship's systems through the neural link in her cryopod. Data flooded her mind. Millions of humans remained in stasis throughout the fleet, the last survivors of Earth. The journey had taken exactly as long as the calculations had predicted, 50,000 years. Images flashed through her mind, the Astral Confederation ships arriving in Earth's orbit with promises of peace and cooperation. The initial celebrations. Then came the betrayal, when their true intentions became clear. The ultimatum: surrender Earth or face extinction. The desperate plan for exodus. "Begin revival sequence for command staff," she ordered, her voice stronger now. "Initiating revival protocols for primary command personnel," Sentinel confirmed. Juwu stepped out of her pod on unsteady legs. Her muscles felt weak despite the preservation therapies. She caught her reflection in a polished panel. Her black hair now had streaks of silver, a side effect of extended cryostasis that the scientists hadn't been able to prevent. Her eyes remained sharp and determined. In the adjacent revival chamber, Commander Park Minho's pod opened. The military officer coughed violently as he regained consciousness. His broad shoulders hunched forward as his body adjusted to being awake. "Admiral," he said when he saw her, attempting to stand at attention despite his weakness. "At ease, Commander," Juwu said. "We have a lot of work ahead of us." In the science wing, Chief Scientist Kim Do-yeon was already reviewing data on his tablet. His thin fingers moved quickly across the screen. "The stellar positions match our predictions," he said without looking up. "We've arrived precisely where we intended." Sentinel's voice came through the ship's communication system. "Admiral, I detect an approaching vessel. Configuration matches Galactic Council scout ship designs in our database." Juwu, Minho, and Do-yeon rushed to the bridge. The ship's view screens activated, showing a sleek silver craft moving cautiously toward them. "They've detected us," Minho said grimly. "So much for the element of surprise." "Perhaps it's better this way," Do-yeon suggested. "A direct approach." Juwu nodded. "Sentinel, passive scans only. Let's see what they do." The council ship circled the Eternal Hope at a distance. Suddenly, Sentinel announced, "They're transmitting. I can intercept their communications." The alien language filled the bridge, automatically translated by Sentinel. "Central Command, this is Scout Vessel Horizon. We've encountered an unknown craft of immense proportions. Design doesn't match any known species in the database. Wait, scanning shows. This can't be right. The occupants appear to be human, requesting immediate instructions." A moment passed before the reply came. "Confirm your report, Horizon. Humans have been extinct for millennia. Scans are definitive, Central Command. The ship contains millions of life signs matching human biological patterns. Impossible. The exiles have returned." Juwu smiled grimly. "They remember us after all." "Should I open communications?" Sentinel asked. "Not yet," Juwu decided. "Let them wonder. Let them worry. Wake the next tier of command staff. We need to prepare. As more humans awakened throughout the ship, the Council Scout maintained its distance. More Council ships appeared within hours, forming a loose perimeter around the human fleet as it gradually powered up systems dormant for thousands of years. In her quarters, Ju reviewed the historical records Sentinel had compiled during their journey. The Astral Confederation had evolved into the Galactic Council, but many of the same species remained in power. They had rewritten history, claiming that humans had destroyed themselves in civil war. Earth had been terraformed and resettled by Council species. All traces of human civilization had been systematically erased. 50,000 years, she whispered to herself. We've waited 50,000 years for this moment. Commander Minho entered after knocking. The fleet is responding, Admiral. 15 generation ships fully operational, the others awakening in sequence. And our special projects. The AI integration is complete. The technology we developed during the journey far exceeds anything the Council possesses, based on our scans of their ships. Jiwoo nodded. During their long sleep, the ship AIs had continued to work, evolve, and create. The humans who returned were not the same as those who had left. They were better, stronger, more advanced. Send a message to all awakened personnel, Jiwoo ordered. Tell them, Operation Homecoming has begun. On the Council ships, panic spread as more human vessels activated. Legends of the exiles had persisted in their cultures as cautionary tales, stories meant to frighten children. Now the legends had returned, and they brought with them the promise of reckoning. What are your orders, Admiral? Minho asked. Jiwoo looked at the image of the Council fleet on the view screen. We wait. Let them come to us. Let them ask the questions they fear to hear answered. And then, Jiwoo said, her eyes hard as stars, we remind them why they feared us enough to send us away. The human fleet moved silently through the edge of the Kepler system. 20 massive generation ships, each carrying hundreds of thousands of sleeping humans, followed the lead vessel where Admiral Jiwoo stood watching on the bridge. The gas giant will shield us from long-range scans, Commander Minho said, pointing to the swirling purple planet ahead. Its third moon has the right composition for our needs. Jiwoo nodded. Begin landing operations. I want our base established within 72 hours. The moon's surface was barren and cold, but beneath its crust lay valuable minerals. Human engineers worked quickly, building structures that burrowed deep underground. The electromagnetic storms that wrapped around the moon provided an extra layer of protection from prying eyes. 3 weeks after arrival, Director Lee Gina walked through the newly constructed command center. The walls were still bare metal, the floors simple composite. Luxury was not a priority. Survival was. Gina entered the main chamber where the Human Reclamation Council held its meetings. 10 men and women sat around a circular table, with Admiral Jiwoo at the head. All eyes turned to Gina as she entered. Our intelligence teams are in position, she reported, her voice clear and confident. Phase 1 is complete. Jiwoo gestured for her to continue. Gina activated a holographic display in the center of the table, showing maps of key Council worlds. We have operatives on 6 major planets, including Proxima IV, where the Council's central archives are located. How did you manage to get our people past their security? Asked one Council member. They must be scanning for human DNA. Gina smiled slightly. The genetic modifications developed during our journey have proven effective. To their scanners, our agents appear as members of various Council species. On Proxima IV, a slender man named Kang Hyunjin sat at a small desk in the vast archives complex. His skin had a slight blue tint, his eyes were larger than a normal human's, and his fingers were longer with an extra joint. To anyone who looked at him, he appeared to be a Proximan, one of the native species that dominated the planet's bureaucracy. Hyunjin waited until the other clerks left for their midday meal. Then he quickly accessed the restricted section of the archives through a terminal he had carefully compromised over the previous weeks. Information flowed into a tiny device implanted in his wrist. That night, in his small apartment, he transmitted his findings through a series of encoded bursts that would appear as regular network maintenance to Council monitors. Earth has been terraformed and repopulated, his message read. The Council's official history claims we destroyed ourselves in civil war. They tell their children that humans were violent and unstable, that we turned our weapons on each other in a frenzy of self-destruction. Back on the moon base, Gina received his transmission and presented it to the Council. They've erased us from history, she said. But Hyunjin has found something else, something they tried to hide even from themselves. She displayed ancient data files that Hyunjin had extracted from the deepest levels of the archives. They showed the real history, the forced exodus, the systematic erasure of humanity from galactic memory, all preserved in files the Council fought long purge. They gave us a choice that was no choice at all, Admiral Ju said quietly, reading the translated text. Abandon Earth or face extinction. Then they removed all evidence of their ultimatum. There's more, Gina continued. We have another agent who has risen further than we anticipated. In the gleaming capital city of the Council's central world, Officer Yoon Tae-young strode confidently through security checkpoints. His uniform marked him as a mid-level security official, but his access reached much higher. His genetic modifications were more extensive than Hyunjin's. He appeared completely as a member of the Draconid species, one of the founding races of the Council. Tae-young had joined the Council's security force 3 years earlier, after extensive preparation on the journey to the Kepler system. His manufactured background had withstood scrutiny, and his natural talents had earned him rapid promotion. We have a situation in Sector 17, his superior told him one morning. A trading vessel reported unusual energy signatures. Near the Kepler system, Tae-young asked casually. His superior looked surprised. Yes. How did you know? Just a guess. That sector has unusual electromagnetic properties that often trigger false readings. Investigate anyway. Take a scout team. Tae-young nodded. I'll handle it personally. Instead of exposing the human base, Tae-young carefully edited the reports, directing attention away from the moon. At the same time, he accessed defense protocols that would be valuable if conflict erupted. The Council's military capacity is significant but spread thin, he reported back to Gina through their secure channel. Their technology has advanced in some areas, regressed in others. Their weapons are powerful but predictable. On the moon base, the Human Reclamation Council reviewed all the intelligence gathered by their agents. Maps of Council space filled the displays, along with defensive capabilities, political structures, and cultural analyses. We could strike now, Commander Minho suggested. With the element of surprise, we could cripple their major defense installations before they mobilize. Admiral Ju shook her head. No, we didn't come all this way. Wait 50,000 years, just for simple revenge. We want more than destruction. We want justice. And our home, added another council member. We want Earth restored to us. Director Gina received an urgent transmission from Tae-young. Council security has detected anomalies in the archive access logs. They're beginning an investigation. Hyunjin may be compromised. Extract him, Ju ordered immediately. Too risky, Gina replied. It would expose our presence prematurely. Then what do you suggest? Gina's expression was resolute. It's time for Phase 2. Let's use this to our advantage. Through Tae-young, we can control exactly what the Council discovers about us, when they discover it, and how they react. Ju considered this, then nodded slowly. Proceed. The time for hiding is coming to an end. On Proxima IV, Hyunjin received his new orders and smiled. Soon, the Council would learn that the ghosts of their ancient crimes had returned. The reckoning was about to begin. Council Supreme Speaker Nam Sojin stood in the center of the emergency assembly hall. Her tall, slender frame was rigid with tension. Above her, a massive holographic display showed images that had shocked the entire council. human generation ships, internal footage of their awakening crews, and ancient records thought long destroyed. 500 representatives from across the galaxy sat in rising tiers around her. Some shouted questions. Others sat in stunned silence. Many whispered frantically to their aides. "Order," Sojin called, her voice cutting through the chaos. The chamber gradually quieted. "I have verified these records personally. The evidence cannot be denied." She paused, gathering her courage for the announcement that would change everything. "The exiles, humans, have returned," she finally said, her voice amplified throughout Council space via the interstellar communication network. "And our history is built on lies." On the security level beneath the Grand Chamber, Officer Yoon Tae-young watched the proceedings on a monitor. His modified features remained calm, but inside he felt satisfaction. The data he had leaked had reached exactly the right people at exactly the right time. Phase 2 of the plan was proceeding perfectly. 3 days earlier, Tae-young had used his security clearance to access the Council's most restricted archives. He planted evidence of unusual activity, then discovered it during his shift. Following protocol, he reported the breach to his superiors, making sure to emphasize the content of the accessed files, ancient records of humanity. At the same time, he arranged for certain historical documents to reach key council members, those known for their ethical stances or historical curiosity. The resulting investigation had led directly to today's emergency session. In the assembly hall, the shouting began again after Sojin's announcement. "This is absurd," bellowed Defense Minister Choi Jae-won, his scaled face flushed with anger. "These could be fabrications, created by some unknown enemy to destabilize us. The verification codes are authentic," countered Ethics Counselor Ba Minji. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep emotion among her species. "These are genuine council records, hidden but never destroyed." "Even if true, what does it matter now?" asked another representative. "These events happened 50,000 years ago. None alive today bear responsibility." Science Administrator Ryu Sunwoo stood up. The small, gray-skinned scientist activated his own display, showing scans of the human fleet. "What matters is not just the past, but the present threat," he said. "Their technology vastly outpaces ours. Our scans show integration with artificial intelligence beyond our understanding. Their ships contain power sources that our instruments cannot even classify." This revelation sent a new wave of panic through the assembly. "Then we must strike first," Jae-won declared. "While they remain at the edge of our territory, we cannot allow them to penetrate further into Council space and risk provoking an enemy that could destroy us." Minji countered. "We should seek dialogue, reconciliation." "Reconciliation?" Jae-won laughed bitterly. "These are the vengeful ones of legend, returning after 50 millennia of nursing their hatred." Across Council space, on hundreds of worlds, citizens watched the emergency assembly broadcast with growing fear. Ancient legends of the vengeful ones resurfaced in cultural memories. Stories told to frighten children of the exiled humans who would one day return to extract terrible revenge. On some worlds, panic led to riots. On others, religious groups proclaimed the end times had arrived. Markets crashed as uncertainty spread. Back in the Kepler system, Admiral Han Ju-woo received Tae-young's encrypted update on the Council's reaction. "It's time," she told Director Lee Gina. "Prepare the transmission." Gina nodded. "All channels are ready. We can broadcast to every Council world simultaneously." Ju-woo took a moment to straighten her uniform before stepping onto the small platform. Cameras focused on her as she stood tall, her silver-streaked hair pulled back tightly, her eyes direct and unflinching. "Begin transmission," she ordered. In the Council assembly, the argument stopped abruptly as every screen in the chamber changed to show Admiral Ju-woo's face. The same image appeared on billions of devices across Council space. "I am Admiral Han Ju-woo of the human fleet," she began, her voice calm and controlled. "After 50 millennia of exile among the stars, We have returned. In the assembly, Sojin watched with the others, transfixed by the human leader's words. Your ancestors gave us a choice that was no choice, Ju continued. Abandon our homeworld or face extinction. They then erased us from history, claiming we destroyed ourselves. But we survived. We endured. We evolved. She paused, letting her words sink in. We do not come seeking war, though we are prepared for it. After 50 millennia, we come for truth and justice. Prepare to answer for your ancestors' crimes. The transmission ended, leaving silence across council space. In the assembly, Defense Minister Jawan was the first to speak. You see, they threaten us. We must mobilize immediately. That was not a threat, Ethics Counselor Minji countered. It was a demand for dialogue, for accountability. Science Administrator Sunwoo shook his head. Whatever their intentions, we cannot match their capabilities. The scans are clear. If they wanted war, they could have struck without warning. Speaker Sojin raised her hands for quiet. Representatives of the Council, we face an unprecedented situation. I propose a direct response to the human fleet. We will acknowledge receipt of their message and request a formal meeting with their leadership. Appeasement, Jawan shouted. Survival, Sojin replied firmly. And perhaps redemption for our history. The vote was close, but Sojin's proposal passed. A response was transmitted to the human fleet, requesting a meeting in neutral space. On the moon base, Ju received the council's message with a grim smile. They're afraid, Commander Park Min-ho observed. With good reason, Ju replied. Accept their invitation, but make it clear. The meeting will take place on the Eternal Hope. If they want to talk, they'll do it on our terms, on our ground. As council representatives prepared for the historic meeting, Officer Tae-young continued his work, gathering intelligence on which council members might be allies, which enemies, and which could be swayed. The humans had waited 50,000 years. They could wait a little longer to ensure justice was properly served. The Grand Council Hall on Proxima Centauri's capital world gleamed under the light of 3 suns. Built of polished stone and metal, it stood as the center of galactic governance for thousands of years. Today, it would witness a moment unlike any in its long history. The massive doors swung open. A hush fell over the assembled representatives as 3 humans entered. Admiral Han Jiwoo led the small delegation, her back straight, her eyes forward. Commander Park Min-ho walked on her right, his military bearing evident in every step. Director Lee Jina moved with quiet grace on her left. Their footsteps echoed against marble floors laid by alien hands 10,000 years after humanity's departure from the galactic stage. Council Supreme Speaker Nam Sojin stood at the center of the hall. We welcome the representatives of humanity to this historic session, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Ju did not smile or bow. She simply nodded once before speaking. We have come a long way to stand before you today. 50,000 years is indeed a long journey, Sojin agreed. Not the distance in time, Ju clarified. The distance in truth. Your people have traveled far from facts into comfortable lies. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Defense Minister Choi Jawan's scales darkened with anger, but Speaker Sojin raised a hand to maintain order. We are here to listen, Sojin said carefully, to learn what has been hidden from us. Ju reached into a small pouch at her belt and removed a data crystal. We present evidence of our exile, she stated, inserting the crystal into a port on the central podium. A holographic display activated, showing ancient text in the original council script. Your predecessors condemned our species to death among the stars. The document rotated slowly above the podium, its official seals and signatures clearly visible. It was the original decree, preserved by the humans for 50 millennia. Let us translate this for all to understand, Ju said. The ancient script shifted to modern council language. By order of the Unified Council, the species known as human is hereby removed from their homeworld designated Earth. Their violent nature and rapid technological advancement pose an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. They are granted generation ships for their survival, but are forbidden from return under penalty of extinction. The council members watched in horror as their founding myths crumbled before historical truth. Many had believed humans had destroyed themselves. Others thought them merely a legend. This cannot be authentic, Defense Minister Jawan protested. These are fabrications. The document contains verification codes and signatures that match our own historical records, said ethics counselor Ba Minji, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly as she examined the data. This is genuine council documentation. Juhu activated a second display. We also preserved the complete record of council debates leading to this decision. Your ancestors feared our potential. They saw that within a few thousand years, we might surpass them. Rather than welcome us as equals, they chose to remove us. Science Administrator Ryu Sunwoo leaned forward with interest. Yet you survived. How did your generation ships maintain life support for 50,000 years? Our models suggest such a journey would be impossible. We adapted, Commander Park answered. Our AI systems evolved. Our technology progressed. We did not merely survive the journey, we thrived despite it. In orbit above the planet, a different scene was unfolding. General Im Jumsu stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Resolute. As commander of the Council's 7th Fleet, he had access to information few others possessed. He had seen the classified reports on human technology and believed them to be a threat unlike any the Council had faced. The humans distract the Council with talk while their fleet remains poised to strike. He told his officers, "We cannot allow this to continue." His second-in-command looked nervous. "General, we have no authorization to engage. History will thank us for our courage," Jumsu replied. "Prepare all weapons. Target the human vessels." Back in the Grand Council Hall, Director Lee's small communicator vibrated gently against her wrist. She glanced at it, then leaned toward Admiral Juhu, whispering urgently. Juhu's expression remained unchanged as she continued addressing the Council. "We seek acknowledgement of historical truth and reparations for our exile. We also demand the return of Earth to human." A Council aide rushed into the hall, interrupting the proceedings. "Speaker, the 7th Fleet has opened fire on the human vessels in orbit." Chaos erupted in the chamber. Speaker Sojin turned pale. General Jumsu was ordered to maintain position only. This was not authorized. All eyes turned to the humans, expecting rage or threats. Instead, Admiral Juhu simply raised a hand to her ear, listening to a communication. "Your general's attack will fail," she said calmly. "But I suggest we observe the outcome before continuing." Above the planet, the 7th Fleet had launched its full arsenal against the 5 human ships in orbit. Energy weapons, missile batteries, and particle beams converged on the seemingly defenseless vessels. When the barrage reached the human ships, something unexpected happened. Instead of explosions or damage, the human vessels activated shimmering fields that simply absorbed the Council weapons' energy. Missiles disappeared into the fields without detonation. Energy beams bent and were drawn into the shields like water into a sponge. The Council representatives watched in stunned silence as the orbital battle displayed on the hall's main screen. After absorbing the full attack, the human ships remained untouched, their position unchanged. No return fire came. Instead, a message transmitted from the human flagship directly to the Resolute. "We could have destroyed you. Remember that when we continue negotiations." In the Council Hall, Juhu turned to Speaker Sojin. "Shall we resume our discussion? Or does General Jumsu wish to waste more of his fleet's resources?" Defense Minister Jawan, who had secretly approved Jumsu's attack, slumped in his seat. "How?" he managed to ask. "How did your shields absorb our most powerful weapons? 50,000 years is a long time to develop technology," Commander Park said simply, "especially when survival depends on it." Speaker Sojin stepped forward, visibly shaken. "Admiral Juhu, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer our deepest apologies for this unauthorized aggression. General Junsu will be removed from command immediately. We did not come seeking war, Ju replied, but we are prepared for it if necessary. Let this demonstration serve as evidence of our capabilities and our restraint. Ethics Counselor Minji rose from her seat. The humans have shown us two things today: the truth of our past and the reality of our present vulnerability. I move that we formally acknowledge the historical wrong done to humanity and begin serious negotiations for reparations. As the council members considered Minji's proposal, Admiral Ju exchanged a glance with Commander Park and Director Lee. Their plan was working. The path to justice, and perhaps even peace, was opening before them. 3 months passed after the confrontation in orbit. During this time, humans and council species began careful discussions. Both sides spoke of history, rights, and possible futures. The humans remained on their ships, while council delegations visited to continue talks. The day of the final assembly arrived. The Grand Council Hall was filled beyond capacity. Representatives from all council worlds gathered to hear humanity's demands. Some came with fear, others with curiosity, and a few with genuine hope for reconciliation. Admiral Ju entered wearing a formal white uniform. She walked alone to the center of the hall. The room fell silent as she took her position. 3 months ago, I showed you the truth of our past, she began. Her voice was strong and clear. Today, I will tell you our vision for the future. She paused, looking around the vast chamber. Thousands of alien faces watched her intently. For 50,000 years, we drifted among the stars, preserved by technology and determination. We measured time in generations, not years. We kept our history alive through stories passed from parent to child. We rebuilt our culture in the darkness between stars. The hall remained deathly quiet. Even those who had opposed the humans listened with respect. We had 50 millennia to plan our revenge, Ju continued. 50 millennia to nurture our anger. We could demand your extinction as payment for our suffering. Many council members shifted uncomfortably. They had seen the power of human technology. They knew such a threat was not empty. Instead, we demand justice, Earth returned to human control, reparations for our exile, and equal standing in a reformed council. Speaker Sojin stepped forward. These terms seem surprisingly reasonable. We did not survive 50,000 years only to become the monsters that sent us into exile, Ju replied. We wish to build, not destroy. The council debated for 7 days. Some members resisted, arguing that Earth had been home to other species for thousands of years. Others worried about human technology, disrupting council economies. But most recognized the wisdom of accepting these terms. On the 8th day, Speaker Sojin announced the council's decision. The terms are accepted, she said formally. Not through coercion, but through recognition of past wrongs and humanity's remarkable restraint. The agreement was signed that day. Earth would be returned to human control within 5 years. Current non-human residents could choose to stay or relocate with full support. Reparations would flow to humanity in the form of resources and technology exchange. And most importantly, humans would join the council as full members with equal standing. As Ju prepared to leave the hall, Ethics Counselor Minji approached her. Many of us expected vengeance, she said. Why choose reconciliation instead? Ju smiled slightly. Because revenge ends with more suffering. Justice can lead to peace. The transformation began immediately. Human ships traveled to Earth for the first time in 50,000 years. They found their homeworld changed but still beautiful. Mountains, oceans, and forests remained, though shaped by different hands. Human scientists, engineers, and planners worked alongside council experts to prepare Earth for its original inhabitants. Cities were built that honored both human traditions and the planet's recent history. The first human children born on Earth in 50 millennia took their first steps 2 years after the agreement. 20 years passed. The reformed Galactic Council now included human representatives. Human technology helped solve problems across Council space. Council species learned from human art, philosophy, and science. A new era of cooperation slowly replaced millennia of separation. On a warm spring morning, Admiral Jiwoo, now aged but still vital thanks to advanced medical technology, stood on a hill overlooking the restored plains of Earth. Her silver hair blew gently in the breeze. Her face showed the lines of responsibility, but her eyes remained sharp and clear. Beside her stood Council reformist leader Oh Jumon, who had been instrumental in implementing the peace agreement. Together they watched children playing in the valley below. Human children ran alongside the offspring of various Council species, their laughter carrying up the hillside. "I never thought I would live to see this," Juwon said. "Our peoples as friends rather than enemies." "We came seeking revenge," Jiwoo said softly, "but found something better, a future." Jiwon turned to study the human admiral's face. "Your restraint changed everything. Why did your people choose peace when you had the power to choose otherwise?" "Our journey changed us," Jiwoo replied. 50,000 years is a long time to think. Our AI companions taught us to see patterns across vast timescales. We saw that cycles of vengeance only lead to more suffering. Below them, a human child helped a small Proximan child climb a tree. The two laughed together when they reached a high branch. "We left as humans seeking vengeance," Jiwoo continued. "We returned to something more. Beings who understood that breaking cycles matters more than settling scores." She pointed to the children. "Those young ones will never know the hatred that sent us into exile. They will build things we cannot imagine." Later that day, Jiwoo visited the Memorial of Exile, a simple monument marking the spot where the last human ship had left Earth 50,000 years earlier. She placed her hand on the smooth stone surface. Commander Park, now stooped with age, joined her there. "Was it worth it?" he asked. "All those years in the darkness?" Jiwoo nodded slowly. "The real evolution of humanity wasn't technological, but philosophical, a wisdom earned through 50 millennia of exile among the stars." As the sun set over the restored Earth, the first stars became visible in the darkening sky. Jiwoo looked up at them, no longer seeing distant prisons, but bridges connecting all intelligent life across the vastness of space. The journey that began in exile had ended in homecoming. The circle was complete.